The crown prince fell for an eunuch, can you believe it? The prince drew her sword, planning to kill Ra-on, but fortunately, the crown prince arrived in time. He took the sword from his sister and rescued our female lead. However, Ra-on was too scared to look up, and didn't see the prince's face. Days later and the results for the third examination were out. Thinking that she can escape the palace, Ra-on submitted a blank paper. However, she still passed because the crown prince wanted her to, even sending her to his palace to work. That day, Ra-on was taking care of the palace's plants when the crown prince suddenly appeared and kept looking at her. Bashful, she avoided his gaze. The crown prince also composed himself and took down the flower in her hair. What kind of man put flowers in their hair? He then fixed Ra-on hate, patted her, and left. That day, the head eunuch asked Ra-on to bring books to the royal library, where the prince is reading books. Hearing that, Ra-on freaked out. She arrived at the library and saw the crown prince. The crown prince was also surprised. Since a bookshelf covered the prince's body, Ra-on asked him if he had seen the prince, but he said no, so she said they should leave the library together. Thinking that Ra-on would know that he's the prince anyway, he stepped out. You once asked for my name, huh? Ra-on turned around, and was perplexed at what he was wearing. My name is Li Young. Ra-on was so scared she became speechless and quickly bowed down, asking the prince to spare her life. The prince only picked up Ra-on's fallen head and put it back on her. Should I execute you, or spare your life? Are there only these two choices? Whatever the case, we are friends, right? Ra-on looked up, surprised. Wasn't that what you said before? What is our relationship if not friends? On her way back, Ra-on keeps thinking about how she talked about the crown prince. He's half human half beast, and even called the prince a rabid dog. Ra-on just has so many regrets right now. The very next day, Ra-on was assigned to be the crown prince's personal eunuch. She begged her boss to change her position, but the crown prince overheard. He asked Ra-on to go inside his room, and Ra-on thought she was going to be punished. However, the prince unexpectedly apologized for lying to her about his identity. He even asked Ra-on to treat him like a close friend when they are alone. This is an order. Ra-on was deeply moved. The prince asked her to help him put on his hat, but he was too tall, so Ra-on had to stand on tippy-toe. The prince also intentionally made himself taller, teasing her. It seems that love is starting to fill the air. It has been 20 years since Ra-on last wore women's clothing. When she was young, her mother would hit her every time she wore a dress. Knowing her thoughts, Yoon-sung secretly bought the dress Ra-on liked. It suddenly started to rain heavily on their way home, so Yoon-sung dragged Ra-on under a roof. Seeing that Ra-on got wet, he put the purchased clothes on her. The moment Ra-on looked back, Yoon-sung was starstruck, but he quickly regained his composure and went to buy an umbrella. Unexpectedly, the crown prince also came to this place to avoid the rain. He noticed the one standing next to him. Since Ra-on was wearing a woman's veil, he didn't recognize her. However, Ra-on noticed him and quickly turned away. She was about to leave when the prince called her back. He found her voice familiar while they talked, and planned to have a look at Ra-on's face, but fortunately, Yoon-sung came back at the right moment to shield her. He said that Ra-on was with him, but the prince still ordered her to lift her face. She is my woman, your majesty. The crown prince was surprised, but didn't question further. Another day passed and the prince was hosting a celebration. However, the main female dancer disappeared, so Ra-on ran into the dancer's room to look for her. Seeing the clothes of the main dancer, Ra-on quickly realized that she had ditched the event. Ra-on took the outfit and sneaked into a room. Here, she let down her hair and put on makeup, dressing like a woman for the first time in years. However, someone outside the room saw it all. At the celebration, the prince was anxious since the dancers hadn't arrived. Suddenly, Ra-on entered, wearing a thin veil to cover her face. Her graceful dancing enchanted the prince. After the celebration ended, the prince started to look everywhere for Ra-on to ask who the veiled dancer was. At that time, Ra-on was running bare feet and accidentally stepped on a stone, bleeding out. Who are you, actually? The prince got to the gate while Ra-on was there, and quickly chased after her. They were so close to each other, but someone suddenly dragged Ra-on away. Not seeing anyone, the prince left. Ra-on realized that Yoon-sung always knew she was a girl. The prince asked the head eunuch to investigate the mysterious dancer. However, they found no clue. The prince, however, realized that Ra-on was the only one that knew about the performance, and asked the head eunuch, "Where is Eunuch Hong?" Scared that she will be discovered, Ra-on planned to return, but Yoon Sung stopped her. He noticed Ra-on's injury and took out his handkerchief to bandage her feet. He went to grab Ra-on's eunuch clothes for her, but discovered on the way that the prince is looking for Ra-on. He's in the East Palace. The crown prince quickly dashed there. When he arrived, Ra-on had already changed and was sitting inside a room. He asked what she was doing, and she said that she had been here all along, arranging musical scores. The prince saw the ink mark on Ra-on's hands and the scores, and doubted himself. Just what was I thinking? Turns out, Yoon Sung told Ra-on to go to the East Place, and she thankfully arrived before the prince. But the prince still had doubts. When Ra-on covered her face with a rag while sneezing, the prince thought that she really resembled the dancer, so he quickly went out and used his palm to cover her face. She was just so similar. Ra-on kept sneezing, so the prince touched her cheek. She was flustered, and the prince quickly hit her on the head. Turns out, Ra-on was spotting a fever without knowing. The prince ordered her to rest for the entire day, but the princess invited Ra-on out to talk. When the princess stood up, the boat tilted, so Ra-on tried to save her and ended up falling into the water. "Eunuch Hong, are you okay? Eunuch Hong?" The prince jumped into the water without hesitance and the worried head eunuch jumped in after him. In the water, the prince found Ra-on and hugged her, successfully dragging her out. Yoon Sung happened to walk by that very moment. After they got to ground, the prince took off his coat and planned to put it on Ra-on. However, the head eunuch stopped him. If people know, Eunuch Hong will run into trouble. The prince had no choice but to take it back and reluctantly left. "Hey, I'm still here." Yoon Sung meanwhile, was heartbroken, and quickly ran to give Ra-on his coat. Will this develop into a love triangle? Find out in our next video.